Good morning and welcome to ASI's Tuesday Morning Show, where our most outspoken editors talk promo products. I'm Teresa Hegel, senior writer for Stitches and Wearables magazines, and with me today is Nate Kuzma, market research director. How are you?
Doing good, Teresa. How's your day going today?
Not too bad. Of course, I just realized that, neither of us are editors, but we're here to talk promo products anyway.
No, but I think we're feeling pretty good for the editors who couldn't make it today.
Yeah, I think we'll do okay. All right, so today we're joined by Bobby Lehew. Bobby is the Chief Branding Officer at Robin, a branded products company recognized 3 years in a row by Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing private companies in the U.S. With more than 20 years of industry experience, Bobby has been recognized in various publications and speaks and writes frequently on the subjects of personal and corporate branding. Welcome to the show, Bobby.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no problem. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you guys?
Pretty good.
Yeah, I would say we're doing pretty well. Glad to have you on the radio with us.
Thank you.
Okay. So Bobby is going to be one of the featured speakers at the ASI show Chicago in July, teaching a number of sessions on branding, marketing, social media, and more. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the power of story selling. So Bobby, what's the key difference between just selling and story selling?
There are several differences. One is when you think of story selling and storytelling in general, there's a huge difference between what we tell each other as anecdotes. So standing around the water cooler this morning or standing next to your office mate, you might have shared an anecdote of what happened last night, an anecdote of what happened over the weekend. We tell each other stories all the time. Joan Didion would say we tell each other stories in order to live. So we're constantly telling stories to each other all the time. The distinction between storytelling and story selling, or maybe the old case history and story selling, is the lack of tension usually. It's more than an anecdote. Typically, for example, your customers are trying to get somewhere. And I'll back up a little bit and say that in the industry, suppliers sell product and distributors sell purpose. Suppliers sell product, distributors sell purpose. This is a big distinction for me as I was learning more about how to approach our customers, because I often would take what suppliers marketed and turn and push that to our audience, the customers, when there needed to be a translation between product and purpose. So when a customer calls us, typically, not always, but typically, the call will sound like this. Hey, we have this event coming up, and we need to find... And if they don't list a product, they'll list a purpose. We have to get people interested in because. And so there is this actual tension that's sort of built into all of the projects that we do in the industry. Mm-hmm. I like to say that behind every order sold is a story waiting to be told.
Okay.
But the biggest distinction is probably that lack of tension, moving a client from one place to another, from disinterestedness to engaged, from doubt to belief to exhaust to invigorate to delay to do. But it has to do with purpose.
Okay. So how can a distributor transform like the orders that they have and, like from just a case study into something that's more of a compelling story? How do they, actually do that?
Well, it does take hard work. That's the interesting part. Storytelling always looks easy, but you look at the Hollywood industry and the millions and millions of dollars, billions that are spent on movie making and storytelling. It takes a lot of hard work. It's very deceptive that it seems like it's pretty easy to do, but one writer put it this way, that everybody's a storyteller the first day. It's the days thereafter when one may discover that having a story to tell differs from having the discipline to tell it, which differs yet further from the dedication to try and tell it well. So what do you do? I often get this question, as a solopreneur in particularly, what do you do when you don't have, say, a marketing staff or folks that are dedicated to story selling? Number one, you just start asking those interrogative pronoun questions that you guys, Teresa, you're good at this because you're an editor, right, but we are not good at this because we're salespeople. You start asking the who, what, when, where, why, and how of your orders. And you don't have to do this on every order. I do still maintain that behind every order sold is a story waiting to be told. But you do have to do this on orders and start developing an ear for narrative. So you might have a customer that has a project come in, and it may not even be a big order, but it's a fantastic story. There's tension, there's purpose, There's meaning. The client might be a high-profile client, but it's a small project. And what you need to start doing is developing your narrative ear by listening for these stories, and then simply ask the who, what, when, where, why, and how questions. Who is this project for? Why are they doing it? What is the product about? Where is it happening? When is it happening? And how did this whole thing come about? When you start asking those questions, you'll actually find out that the easy part of story telling is investigating. That once you develop the skeletal structure with who, what, when, where, why, and how, you can actually begin to write the story, which is the hard work.
So Bobby, here's my question for you. So when earlier you mentioned about how solopreneurs and small companies, there's not marketing departments in a lot of our companies.
Right.
So one of the new areas that's come up in the last 10 years is the role of social media in story selling. What are some best practices or tips that you have for our listeners about how to utilize social media?
Well, I would still point out that storytelling through your social media is imperative. And here's the biggest distinction for our industry. Our industry has constantly made the product the hero of the story, when product is not the hero of the story. The client and the client's objectives are the hero of the story. And a huge transformation occurred in my mind back in 2004. You guys published an article. Michelle Bell actually co-wrote it with a colleague, and it was the top 10 case histories ever told in our industry. It's still out there. You can actually go to ASI Central and Google this. And there were 10 wonderful case histories. And one of them was the Microsoft mug story. I don't know if you guys have heard this story, but the Microsoft mug story was basically a story between Microsoft and Oracle. So two competing companies. And by the way, I'm getting to your social media question with a very long story here. Two competing companies, Microsoft and Oracle. They had a competing product. They both had a $5 million database server product that they sold to customers. There was an interesting thing that happened. Microsoft started handing out these mugs with a Microsoft logo on it and putting them on prospects' desk. When an Oracle salesman was pitching the software and he spotted that Microsoft mug, Oracle was 20% higher. Theirs was $1 million higher than Microsoft's product. Well, Oracle would have to start lowering their price because they knew Microsoft had already been in the room and that they knew they had to compete. One of the executives at Microsoft got a great idea. He said, let's capitalize on this. Let's hand out more of those mugs, but let's do something a little different. On the back side of the mug, we're going to print instructions for use. And the instructions read something like this. Number 1, place mug prominently on your desk. Number 2, when Oracle salesman pitches $5 million of overpriced software, glance down at mug. Number 3, Oracle salesman spots mug, offers 20% discount. Number 4, skip steps 2 through 3 and call Microsoft instead. Save millions to get the industry's highest performance enterprise solution with no bitter aftertaste. Now, the story gets better. Comdex used to be the technology show of the year. Back in the day, Comdex was huge. That was the major technology show. Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle, was a keynote speaker. Microsoft said, let's take these mugs to the event and hand them out to attendees as they walk into the keynote. Ellison got one of the mugs, took it to the stage and brandished it, tried to denounce it from the podium. And here's the important part about this, is that the Microsoft PR executive at the time said they received $1 million worth of free PR because of a $1.29 mug. Back then it was a 99-cent mug. When people ask me about social media, I always try to get them out of their mind off of the channel and back to the story, because the stories that we have floating through our order entry systems are powerful. And it's the greatest testament to our medium itself is to extrapolate these details, look for the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and start telling the story. Once you start putting flesh around the skeletal structure of the story, you actually ignite our medium in the minds of the listeners, and you start planting these little story seeds. So when it comes to social media, back to my intro into all of this, is that the product in this case of the Microsoft Oracle story is not the hero, but the product was critically important. But you notice that the story was told from the perspective of the customer, not from the perspective of the product. And that's a huge distinction.
Yeah, absolutely. That really is a great story. So let's say you have a story with your company that would maybe not rival that Microsoft Oracle story, but still be a very good story. What are some best practices you can say for actually getting your story noticed, whether on the web or through other traditional medium? What are the best practices you would have for that?
As far as getting attention and eyeballs on the story, I would recommend, first of all, it's interesting to me how much the conversation goes to social media. When I was privileged to hear Teddy Goff, the digital director for campaigns, Obama's 2 political campaigns when he was running for presidency. And regardless of your politics, you have to say that the Obama campaigns, when he was running for president, particularly the first time, was one of the most spectacular marketing campaigns we'd ever witnessed from a political candidate, for sure. My point is that Teddy Goff spoke at the Marketing Profits B2B conference that I attended one year, and he said, out of all the digital tools they've done, the president did a Reddit interview. They did Facebook and Twitter and all these wonderful social media channels that we now have, and he said that email delivered them the greatest return on their investment in the entire campaign. It was the most important. So to get back to story selling, I like to divert the conversation with folks when I'm talking to a distributor about, yeah, fine, we can talk about Twitter and Facebook all you want, but let's talk about your email marketing first. And number 2, what are you putting there? Because the biggest thing about these channels like Twitter and Facebook is what to put there. So to answer your question, how do you actually get eyeballs? First of all, you start telling the stories of your customer projects, which is really hard for distributors to do because they're afraid to talk about their clients because they're afraid their clients will get stolen from them, which in this age, as competitive as the market is, there are 5 or 6 distributors lined up at any good customer's door. You're not going to be spilling any secrets by telling you the fact that ABC Corporation uses promotional products. So get out of the fear of talking about your clients. Start talking about your clients. Here's the interesting thing that started happening to us when we started talking about our clients. Number 1, they appreciated it because they wanted the eyeballs on their brand too. So when you do it well, the respect for you and your medium actually increases. The sort of the underlying current that happened that really surprised me was your existing clientele saw the stories that you were telling through your email and through your social media channels, and they got a broader perspective of the clientele that you serve, and your brand sort of just increased in stature. Our brand did too, and I was really impressed with the comments I would get from clients. They would say things like, "I had no idea you worked with so many people." When in fact, when you look at most distributors, they live in the 80-20 rule all day long. 80% of their revenue comes from 20% of their clients. But what a healthy comment from a customer. We went from throwing product at people all the time to telling our client-centric stories and actually having people read about the product.
Okay. That's really interesting. So when you're a distributor and, you meet someone and they say, what do you do? Like, everyone talks about like the elevator pitch and things like that, but how do you do that? How do you make people interested in, what you do?
That's a great question, Teresa. In fact, our old transformation in terms of starting to story sell as opposed to pushing product came about because of a frustration I felt answering that question. I got really tired of sitting by people and them turning to you at a networking event and saying, "So what do you do?" And I tried everything. I tried to be creative. I tried to come up with adjectives. I tried to, the mission statements, the 30-second elevator speeches, the whatever you call it, they just seemed to fall flat. Because what would happen is the minute I started to be creative, they would get this puzzled look in their face, and I would devolve into what all of us do when we don't know what to say. We say, well, we do hats, pins, and mugs with logos on it. Then they would go, oh, okay, I get it. And then what would happen in their eyes is they would turn you off completely. Mm-hmm. They would either think, I've already got a person that does that for me, or, oh, my God, I'm sitting by a salesperson. And so I always had a really frustrating experience answering that question, because the other side of it is I know our medium is important and it does some cool things. So I came up with some taglines, and you're welcome to steal these at any time. Remember the stories that we're trying to tell about our orders that are happening, our clients all the time. Start building a database of these stories, and either publish them on your own website or just keep them personally, privately, however you want, but start telling the story. You'll begin to get a backlog of projects and stories that you can tell. So now when I sit by somebody, I have a few lead-ins. Depending on who I'm sitting by, I may say something like, we create memorable moments. And then here's the secret. I lead with a story. I simply tell a story about one of our projects from the customer's perspective. And here are more. We surprise and delight. We do, in our particular brand, we do company stores, and so ours is we make branded products simple. And then I lead with a story. And the story I'm telling is simply a project that we've done from a customer, told from the customer's perspective. We are professional motivators, story. We create calls to action, story. We are the make things happen medium, story. We are a fan factory. I love that, actually. Wexley, I stole that from Wexley, who spoke, the ad agency who spoke at the ASI Power Summit. That's what he called his brand. I thought that's theft-worthy right there. We are a fan factory. I mean, look at football games and look at all the apparel that goes on there. What we do is we create fan factory. I always like to tell people with company stores, we create brand champions. What happens, too, is when you follow that with a story, the conversation usually doesn't end with them turning you off. The conversation ends with them asking more questions. Oh, really? And you guys do all that? So what'll happen is once you start telling stories, you'll start crafting stories that complement your unique value proposition. And those are the best stories to tell, the kinds of things that only you can do. And that creates actually a more dynamic conversation with people.
Now, Bobby, you just mentioned actually about their value proposition. If a distributor is new to the industry and
Right.
they're trying to develop what their unique value proposition is, how do they go about doing that? Are there any tips that you can give them to develop their unique value proposition? Anything that they should be thinking about when they're doing that?
Yeah. As you're moving every year, analyze your top 10 customers. Analyze your top 10 customers, and even if you're 6 months into the business, analyze your customers. Analyze who it is that you love working with the most. Analyze your best paying customers. Analyze your most profitable customers. List them. Then ask the questions, what is it that they like about us? And there's a chapter in a very old book, but one of the most powerful business books ever written, called The Hedgehog Principle. And it's about understanding what it is that you do better than anyone else. And one of the things you have to also develop an ear for is if you turn to your clients and ask them, hey, what is it that we do better than anyone else? They're just going to respond with whatever the most immediate pressing concern was. Maybe it was your speed. Maybe they loved that creative campaign you did. Well, service and speed are common, too common. What you have to do is you have to listening for what they don't say. I actually say you actually have to listen for the superlatives and the expletives. You actually have to listen for the things they don't say, like, wow, that was really great what you guys did, or you guys really relieved us from having to do this. You start crafting your own story around listening what customers, why they buy from you. Now, this and to answer your question a little better, if you're new in the business, you don't have all of that analysis ready. So what you have to do is you have to look at other distributors in the business and find out what it is that you want to, how it is you want to craft your business. You know, do you want to be more of an agency model? Do you want to be more of a service model like ours with the company stores? And you can begin to do it that way. But most importantly, every year if you analyze your top paying customers, you will actually reinvent yourself. And it'll happen every couple of years. It actually will happen.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Bobby. That was really great. It was a lot of great information. We appreciate it.
Sure.
And we'll see you in
Thanks
Chicago.
for having me on, guys.
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll look for you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, I thought he had some good stuff to say. What did you think of
Yeah,
his
no, I mean, I
points?
think it's really interesting. I mean, I think one of the things that I do, I mean, as the director of research here at ASI, and I've done this throughout my entire career, is I can put a bunch of statistics up on a board. I can put 15, 20 different, percents, bar charts, and all that, and that's all great and fine. But it's really, really boring, and it would not differentiate anything.
Right.
So what really matters there is not only what you're showing, but also what's the story behind it. What numbers are just numbers, but if you tie a bunch of numbers together, you can create a compelling story to influence anything. I think that's sort of what this is. You can say, yeah, I sold 150 mugs to a bank. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
It's true.
Right,
There's
but
nothing
it's not
wrong with it,
interesting.
but it's not interesting, and it doesn't really tell the whole story. Say I sold 150 mugs to a bank who gave them out to their most loyal customers at their grand opening, and out of that they received X number of new accounts that were opened up, and those clients have been with them for 10 years. That's a story. It's still the same facts, but it's much more compelling.
Right. I mean, I know that if I have to look at a bunch of numbers, I'm going to kind of glaze over and just not really care. But So yeah, I mean, as a writer, of course, I always think there's a story in everything, and that's what we want to try and find. So it's definitely good advice for distributors. And so we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to talk about 12 things truly confident people do differently, which, everyone wants to be confident, and, confident people that are actually confident and not, I guess, arrogant or something, they have the upper hand over people that are doubtful and skittish. So these are a couple of things that confident people do that sets them apart. So one thing is they get their happiness from within. So they don't have to, whatever they're doing, they're not worried about other people's approval. They get that satisfaction from what they do, which is good, because if you always worry about what other people think, you're going to, make yourself crazy. And they don't say yes unless they really want to. So that's another good thing. Some people think that you can never say no, but that's another thing that'll drive you crazy, I think, and you're not really confident if you always have to say yes to everything. They listen more than they speak. They don't have to fill the air all the time with their own words. Let's see, there are some good ones. They exercise. Well, that's always good when you can find time for it. They aren't afraid to be wrong. They celebrate other people, and they aren't afraid to ask for help. So these are all good things to try and up your confidence. Act like confident people.
Yeah, and you know what? The one thing that I'm looking at here is when I'm talking about, the 25 daily habits that will make you smarter. And
Which you really need, right?
Well, it doesn't hurt. I mean, you know what? Everybody, you need habits, and some of the things you mentioned about how to become more confident. Yeah. Some of the areas about how to make you smarter, they're very, very similar. And one of the consistencies throughout this is it's making time for yourself. I mean, I have two kids. So there's not always all that much time for myself, and I guarantee you my wife would say there's a lot less time for even her, which probably is. Right. But to make yourself smarter, you really have to give yourself time, and it's downtime. It's not running here, doing this, making this. So some of the habits that make you smarter, too, are very similar. It's reading a newspaper and or reading a book. When you read, everybody reads news stories online. They go to blogs. They go, to different social media sites. Right. They look at what their friends are doing. Look at pictures of cats, whatever. But when you're reading something in a newspaper, actually a hard copy, I'm not talking online.
So you want it to be the actual paper.
It has to be, in a book, I'm not even, a Kindle's, I guess, okay for this. But you want something where you actually have to put away your electronics, I think. If you can take out a book or you take out a newspaper, you're flipping through a newspaper, there is a commitment there of time that is taking you away from everything. The other thing that I would say is, you mentioned exercise, and that's important. But I enjoy doing this. I do this all the time in my job. I also do it in my personal life, which sometimes drives certain people in my life crazy. But it's playing devil's advocate. Now, if somebody says the sky's blue, you can say, well, how do you know that? What does that mean to you? It's that's sort of a crude example.
Right.
But by playing devil's advocate to something, just in sort of almost like a game fashion, you kind of can explore different perspectives that you might not others see.
Right.
So when you watch TV shows on, I'm going to bring up ESPN, but you have all guys who argue back and forth about totally nonsensical, non-important stuff, it still brings up a very different perspective that you might not actually come from.
Right.
So when I'm here and I'm presenting market research results either at one of our shows or to my colleagues, I actually encourage them to challenge me on them, because it's not that what I'm showing is wrong. It's not that they're wrong, but it could definitely take us into totally different directions.
That's my 3-year-old and my husband are both devil's advocates all the time. So it's a little exhausting when you're on the other end of it. But
oh no, and it can be, but it's something that I've learned over my life to not take that personally when people do that,
right.
Because it's an opportunity for them to express themselves. And here's the other thing I've learned: if people are playing devil's advocate, you know what that actually means to me? They're engaged in the conversation.
That's true.
They're not just sitting there passively asking. And I enjoy doing that just because I get more engaged in the conversation, because my mind has to process a lot more different areas. So similar to that, and again, it's to make yourself smarter. You share with other people, and the reason you're sharing with other people, you're going to make them smarter, but you're also going to make yourself smarter, because you're going. Whenever you have to do a presentation or you have to go and give a speech, you rehearse it. Right. And the reason you rehearse it is not only to get the nerves out, but when you're rehearsing it, every time you go through it, you're going to think of something else to say. So when I share with people, I not only am sharing with them to get their knowledge, but every time I do it, I'm going to think of a different angle, a different perspective, a different way, a different outlet for the information. And again, then that just plays into the whole devil's advocate thing. something, if you ever come over to my desk or you ever seen, I have a to-do list on my desk.
Okay.
It's a piece of paper. Every day when I get an email, a phone call, somebody stops in my office, I just write it down there. But then when I do something that's not on that list, this may seem really, really ridiculous, I actually write it down.
And then cross it
And then
off.
I cross it out.
Oh, yeah, there's something very satisfying about crossing something off a list.
It is, even if
Love
it
it.
wasn't on the list until 5
Right,
seconds
right.
before you crossed it out. Because what that shows is, over the course of a day, you may be done, with your work day, you're leaving, you're going home, like, I got nothing done.
But then you can look at the list.
But then you just look down at your list, like, well, those 5 things that are crossed out on that list, they weren't there this morning.
That's true.
So it gives you a sense of, certainly gives you a big sense of accomplishment. And the final thing I'm going to talk about is, and this is sort of my favorite, it's set aside time to do nothing. And I mean nothing. It's, you don't have, in our day-to-day life, especially when you have a family and you have children and you have work and you have soccer practice and karate practice, and you don't have time to do nothing. But you know what? Here's sometimes it's about trying to find the time to do nothing, because it gives your mind a chance to just relax.
Right.
And it gives you a chance to refocus. So there's times when I take my daughter to soccer practice, right? And I'm in, I'm out, I can run errands here, run errands here, run errands here. Sometimes what I do is I'll just put my chair back, turn off the car, and just close my eyes.
Chill.
Sometimes I'll chill out. Sometimes
Chill
I'll just go for a walk around the soccer field, not having to deal with anything. I'll leave I know it's like against everything that our society does. I take my phone and I leave it in the car.
That is shocking.
I turn it off sometimes. And even if only for 30 minutes, it's amazing what happens when you disconnect yourself. After you get over the initial sense of anxiety, which is going to happen.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like a phantom, like buzzing or ringing?
Yeah. Hopefully that's just all in my mind and not. But yeah, you
Not
do
a
feel
symptom,
that.
yeah.
Like, wait, it's buzzing. Wait, my phone's not even in my pocket. So yeah, you do feel that. But it gives yourself and your mind a chance to just regenerate and just to be by yourself, because nowadays we're really never by ourselves. You're always one phone call away, one text away, one, hey, here's a new picture of my kids playing soccer,
Right,
which you
right.
need to see. Everything's always right there. But when you have a chance to be by yourself and do nothing, again, I think that just is extraordinarily important. And it does make you smarter, because it gives you a chance to actually learn and know yourself better.
Yeah, you get to recharge and kind of think about things in a different way.
Yep.
All right, well, those are great. I think those are all helpful tips. And I think that's all the time we have today. So
All
join
right.
us next week.
Thanks
well,
a lot,
not
everybody.
us, but join somebody next week.
There'll be somebody here
Somebody
at
here.
these
Maybe
seats.
real editors this time.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.